Hi, my name is Ash, and I just finished Shanghai Girls, and I just loved it. Lisa See is one of my favorite authors. I read The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane first, and up next is China Dolls. So, I love her novels. They're really special to me. Historical fiction is really something that interests me, and I think she does a really good job intertwining that into her stories. So I just wanted to chat about it because I love that they also put in these little reading questions. So I just circled a few that I'm going to go through that I really connected with. So some of the ones, like number 3, which sister is smarter and which is more beautiful, as a question. I feel like that's obviously very objective. So I just don't feel like that's like a really, conversational piece. So number 4 is actually the first question that I really connected with. So each sister believes that her parents loved the other sister more. Who is right about this and why? So I love this question because I was actually really shocked by the conversation at the end of the book between Pearl and May. With concerning their parents and who liked who more and what they thought of as their upbringing, of like how they perceived their parents to treat them and like them. Because as I was reading, and early on, from Pearl's perspective, I also thought that the parents favored May. But on pages 296 and then 297, they refer to speaking to Pearl in Suzup as a term of endearment. And so she says it was like a way to exclude her. So it was really interesting to see that perspective, and it was really cool because I don't have a sister, but I do have a brother, so I can imagine that some sisterly bonds do go through this sort of like favoritism or unsurety of that. So I thought it was really special that she intertwined that into the book, because it was something that I did think about as I was reading in the beginning of the book. So it's definitely a point that she wanted to let readers know about and get across. So I thought that was a really good question, and it was just really interesting to see both perspectives of the relationship between the sisters and the parents. So my next question that I really liked was, and first of all, just the cover art too, I really, really enjoy, because, I honestly judge a book by its cover. But if it says Lisa See, I'm reading it no matter what, because I love her writing, her prose, like I just love her diction, everything like that. I love the historical fiction aspects of it. She is an 8th Chinese. Her mother, Carolyn, is descendants of Asian culture, and so I think it's really special. It's just, I can imagine she learned a lot, and she does note in her author's note in the book that she's been through several interviews, and she a lot of the stuff in the story, of course, is true and based on true events. So I think that's really, really special that she can create a work of art based on that, and share that with so many people, because I really have learned a lot, and it's really interested me and opened my eyes into what people have gone through in those countries, especially like with the Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane in war times and stuff like that. And this story, especially now, the girls coming over to America and trying to live a better life, and it was totally an unknown thing, paper sons, paper wives type of thing. So to see that perspective and to get that perspective and knowledge is really, really special in a novel. So I highly, highly recommend this book, that you read it all the way through, because you really will learn a lot for sure. But anyways, to the next question, number 7 up here. So it says, Shanghai Girls makes a powerful statement about the mistreatment of Chinese immigrants in the United States. Were you surprised about any of the details in the novel related to this theme? Absolutely it does, and absolutely I was. Like I said in the last question. So from the Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane, we read a lot about what happened during the war times, and I feel like this book was less intense. It does have some graphic adultery scenes, like rape scene, which does go on for a few pages, so just a little trigger warning. But actually this is pretty much for people who've already read the book. So you know, it was a lot to take in. You know, there are some hard chapters, especially if you've been through or you've known somebody that's gone through something like that. I can imagine that might be a little bit more to get through. But I just feel like this book was a little bit less intense than The Tea-Girl of Hubbingburn Lane. But historical fiction has quickly become one of my favorite types of genres of books, because you really can learn a lot, and it's so fun to read, you know, somebody else's perspective and how they kind of, you know, interpret it and intertwine that into their art form. So I think reading historical fiction is really, really special. And there's lots of traffic behind me. Next question is number 12. So it is, the novel begins with Pearl saying, "I am not a person of importance." After Yen Yen dies, the grandmother, Pearl comments, "Her funeral is small. After all, she was not a person of importance, rather just a wife and mother." How do you react to comments like this? So I think that Lisa definitely wanted to put this in there to note, to reinforce the fact that, you know, that a lot of women in Chinese culture weren't respected that much, which is totally ludicrous, because, you know, to create a man, you need a woman. And so I was just really taken aback by this statement. It immediately made me think back to, we had watched some Egypt documentaries where many of the women that they did find, their sarcophagi were, or like their buried bodies preserved, they were only really given proper burials if they were someone of decent importance, such as like Tutankhamun's nurse, or of course Cleopatra. And, you know, they were buried with respect. You know, they were buried, you know, either with their hands crossed or over their chest. So it was a thing that, you know, to treat women with respect, but it's not every woman, it's not all women, you know. So I was really surprised, you know. So I was surprised, but I also wasn't shocked, I guess, to answer that question. And I think questions 13 and 12 kind of tie into each other. So speaking of Yen Yen, Pearl notes, "When we're packing, Yen Yen says she's tired. She sits down on the couch in the main room and dies." Why does Pearl describe Yen Yen's death in such an abrupt way? And again, I think this is to further enforce the point that in Chinese culture, girls and women were not as important to society as men, which is crazy. You know, like I said, we need women to create men and vice versa, you know. So I think that she definitely puts these things in there to really convey the fact that, you know, things like this did happen and may still happen. I'm not sure. But, you know, it is sad, and I think it's just a way to reinforce like the Chinese culture as a whole. So then question 16. I thought this question was really fun because as I was reading the book, I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's really special. So follow along here. But how do clothes define Pearl and May in different parts of the story? How do the sisters use clothes to manipulate others? So I thought they were so especially clever in the book, especially May being the kind of mastermind behind it, that they would wear certain things to get their way. You know, they would dress either more elegantly, or they would dress down, or they would, the trick that I thought that was really, really cool, is that they would use, the cocoa cold powder to make them look more tan, so they would look like poor farmers or peasants or workers. So because people who seemed like they had money obviously were targeted, searched, and then got their tidings taken away. So I thought that was so especially clever, and it was really cool to note. I read the author's note in the back. Lisa mentions that the cocoa cold powder trick was one that 2 missionaries who used while fleeing Hong Kong, that she, heard when she was getting her interviews and gathering all her information. So I think it's a really cool thing, a really special thing, and it is a true testament to the statement that many people will judge a book by its cover, so all in all, I really loved reading this story, and I hope you did too. I think Lisa is a great writer. Her and her novels about Chinese culture, like I said, have truly opened my eyes to things that have happened, and that a lot of women and other people went through. So it was just really amazing, to see what people went through to come to this country to have a better chance at life. So, and I also really love how Lisa ends her book. She always ties in her novels to some, minuscule detail that she mentioned earlier in the book, or some character that we totally didn't forget about, or that we totally forgot about or didn't even suspect, because oh my goodness, ZG is Joy's father, and we the whole time, who would have suspected that? So I thought that was just such a crazy twist, and I was so just not expecting it, even though the last book that I read, The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane, she did this same thing. So if you've read that book, I'm gonna go and do a discussion on that one, and so we can talk about how what actually happened. But if you've read that book as well, then because this is only my second Lisa See novel, like I said, up next is China Girls, so be on the lookout for that review. But like I said, amazing novel. Historical fiction is definitely at the top of my list, and I can't wait to start her next novel. And thanks for chatting with me.